Our next speaker is Peyman Askari. He was the People's Party of Canada's candidate for West Vancouver Sunshine Coast Sea to Sky Country. He holds a degree in computer science and a PhD in computational neuroscience. Today, he will speak on a trajectory towards dependency. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Peyman Askari.
Let me try to get the timer here so I don't go over. Hello, everyone. My name is Peyman Askari. I've been coming to these Capitalism and Morality conferences for, this is my third time now. So after the last conference, I begged Jayant to let me interview him. I have a podcast, and he came on and he's done a couple of interviews, and I think he felt sorry for me because he saw I only had like 4 subscribers. So he approached me and he said, I guess to lift my spirits, he's like, would you like to speak at the next conference? And, you know, I was a little bit intimidated because I've come here, like I've seen Rick, I've seen Albert. They're very confident, they're very intelligent, they're educated. And Jayant himself, he's sort of, you know, financially successful. So that was intimidating on its own. And then he turns to me and he says, you know, you can give a speech, but it has to be something unique, like something that no one's ever done. So for the last like year, I've been a nervous wreck, and I left the writing of this speech until 4 a.m. this morning, and I cobbled this thing together. So let's see how this goes. I wanted to give a story, sort of my understanding of what's happening to Canada from the perspective of an immigrant that came here. I got my education here. I ran for office here. Thank you, Mr. Bernier, for giving me that opportunity. And then the last few years, I've had a podcast and I've been interviewing hundreds of Canadians. So I have a good understanding of what's going on in Canada, but I wanted to share from my eyes as a child, like what I saw. I didn't understand at the time what was going on, but I see now looking back, like those were the milestones that as an immigrant coming from the third world, what I saw was wrong in this society. So a little about me. I was born in Iran in 1983. There was a war going on. So we decided to get the hell out of Iran. So we cut and ran. We come to Canada, fast forward now, 35 years. So what's going on? 50% of the country has their elbows up. The other 50%, they have their head up the ass. And I'm going to my parents and I'm saying, all right, maybe it's time to leave and go somewhere else from Canada. And I was at the bar with Albert yesterday, and he was joking. He goes, well, maybe at some point it's you that's the problem. Like if you're going from country to country and every country is failing, you're the problem. But he's right in a way, but it's not just with Iranians. If you look at Canadians right now, Canadians and Americans, a lot of them are leaving and they're going to Mexico, for example. Well, what's happened in Mexico recently? There was a protest in Mexico City where they're saying, you know, all these Canadians and Americans are coming in and they're causing a cost of living crisis. Now, the reason I mention that is it's almost like we're behaving as locusts. Like we go into a country that's established and we pillage it. We eat all the wealth and then we just assume we can go somewhere else. And I don't think that's sustainable. I think at some point we kind of have to make a stand and try to, I don't know, repair the institutions that are here. So this is going to be like a series of short stories of what I remember as a kid. The first impression I got, I was in 4th grade, and this was when I realized like something was wrong in Canada. And this girl came up to me and she said, my mom is a bitch. And that just blew my mind. Like coming from the Middle East, like getting your ass kicked by your dad was like a regular occurrence. But if you ever called your mom something like that, I don't know what would happen. So like, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but because, you know, we've all read Lord of the Flies, we've all watched Clockwork Orange, but just this irresponsible youth sort of culture, I think it's really affected Canada in a negative way. It probably has to do with the breakup of the family unit. The next big thing I noticed was, surprisingly, it was with food. I was kind of I was a little bit different when I immigrated here. I was on a mission to become as Canadian as possible. Like I just figured I'm gonna shed my third world culture. You know, I'm part of the West. This is so cool. So the first time I got invited to a sleepover, I go to my friend's house, and like these were the coolest people I've ever seen. You know, you have like pretzels, you have Doritos, you have M&Ms, you have salsa, and like, you know, you get ice cream, and for lunch you get McDonald's. And I'm looking at these guys. I'm like, I can't invite these guys to my house. Like I would be utterly embarrassed. You know, they're coming over. You got pistachios and walnuts and figs, and you know, my mom's putting tzatziki on the table, and the food was just like, you got a mountain of rice and you got this weird looking stew, and it's just it's a cultural gap that I can't, you know, I can't bridge that divide. But that was me as a kid that way. Like looking back now, that's like almost bad parenting. Like you're guaranteed your kids are going to have type 2 diabetes. You're giving them processed foods. Like you got M&M on the table. Where I'm going with that is, again, I didn't know this at the time, but we have this, in the West, we treat mothers as like a useless role, you know, kind of like the guy that presses the button on the elevator, or the guy in the club in the bathroom that gives you the towel, you know, you can do away with. But the mother is sort of an institution. She's supposed to prepare people for life. It's the mother and the father. They're supposed to protect them, and raise the children. But that's another thing I noticed that was, it was eroded. And it was really difficult for me when I was in school. People would ask me, like, you know, they go around the room, what does your mom do? And someone's like, yeah, my mom's a nurse. The other one's like, yeah, my mom's a doctor. And I was an astronaut. My mom is this, that. And then they would get to me and I'm like, my mom's unemployed. Like I didn't know what to say. So that was another thing that I would say is different between the Middle East and the West. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. Like, I use the phrase agency. So one of my earliest memories in Iran, I would accompany my mother as we're going through the bazaar. You know, she's buying the vegetables. So she'd pick out the vegetables and she'd give it to the vendor. The vendor would put it on the scale and, you know, the counterweight. This is very old school. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this. And then you got the vendor's got the calculator or the abacus, and they figure out the cost, and my mom pays in coin. Now, I mean, it's pretty cool for me now. I could never say that to my friends when I was a kid. They'd think I was, you know, from the Stone Age or something. But like, let's break that down for the people here that are libertarians. Like the vendor, the merchant would negotiate with the bazaar owner, and he would rent that space. The vendor would also go and source the vegetables, so he knows his profit margin. He knows his costs, he knows his revenue, so he gets profit margin. My mother would pay in coin, so she has agency, she has sovereignty, dominion. She has ownership of that coin, and she's in control. And the most important thing that people, maybe I didn't make clear in that, the government is not involved in that. So if the government's not involved, it's a lot harder for them to tax you. If they can't tax you, they can't grow. And the way I tie that back into life here in the West, which I realize now, is debit cards. Like I think the moment that Canada got debit cards, that culture, it was the beginning of the end. And right now we're just taxed to death, and they can trace everything that we do. Another story, and the libertarians here might like this. My parents, they grew up in a farm. There was no taxes. There was no zoning. There was no bureaucracy. And when I say there was no taxes, there was no property tax. There was no sales tax. There was no income tax. All the roads were gravel. You had a sheriff, and, you know, every once in a while you paid them. You had a school at the beginning of the year, you go pay the teachers. One other thing that might blow your mind, they had no money. They had, like, if they went to the butcher and they wanted to buy something, they had a tally stick. They take it with them. You know, they put a notch on the tally stick. At the end of the year, they would settle the debts, not in coin, but in barter. So they'd be like, we bought 50 pieces of meat, give them, I don't know, 10 bales of hay or whatever they had. Albert, last night you said, you know, I'm yet to see a system of anarcho-capitalism that works. I swear, this is pretty close as you can get to anarcho-capitalism. And they functioned like like there was no problems. Everything worked. But I always thought that was interesting. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'm a little bit more libertarian, despite growing up in Canada, despite wanting to become Canadian. I think it's well, the way that they grew up. They told me, like, Peyman, it's just you and God. No one's going to come and save you. We don't even talk about the word pension in my family. I'm going to blast through the rest of this stuff. Another difference that exists between sort of the Middle Eastern cultures and the West is in education. So growing up, my parents taught me you have to go either become an engineer or you have to go become a doctor. Like, those are the two options you have. And the joke is, you know, Asians use this. You're either an engineer, a doctor, or a disgrace. It's like, it's a productive-based society. They're a little bit old school, but in the third world, they see value in physical assets. I'm not ashamed to say this, but we are not as sophisticated as the West. So the West, you have, you know, complex financial models and you have stock markets and bonds and this and that and the other thing. And you can advance more. But in the Middle East, they're like, if I can't touch it, it doesn't exist. And I contrast this with the way people think here in the West. In the West, you go get an education based on how quickly you can make a lot of money. And that usually equates into two things: banking or law. And I have to admit that they are, like, the West is more sophisticated, and I'll concede this, but I think this mentality has resulted in what we're calling the financialization of the economy. Like, greed is good because you want to accumulate as much as you can so you can spend money on the ones you love, but only so far as you actually produce something of value. And I think with we've passed the point where we're now not producing anything of value. I got one final funny story. I used to, in the 90s, we came here in 89, so we used to go to Turkey a lot to meet with my family because Turkey has a bilateral treaty with Iran, so they can enter without a visa. And here's how it would work. We'd fly into the airport. You'd find somebody hanging around the airport with a Sprinter van. You negotiate a rate to use him as a driver. He takes you around Istanbul, and you see people who are renting their house. The lady comes out onto the balcony. You negotiate a rate. And I remember one exchange where the lady's like, okay, fine, you can rent it, but where are you from? And my dad's like, oh, we're from Iran. So the lady starts screaming. He's like, oh, you Iranians, you're all this and that, and your women are this and that. And my father has some choice words back with her. He gets back in the car, smile on his face. He's like, all right, next house. So we go find the next house. We finally rent a place. One final thing, I got sick, so they had to find a doctor. And the way you do that, you went door to door, knocking on people's doors. Is anyone here a doctor? Is anyone here a doctor? Finally, somebody was a doctor. You know, they pinned me down and stripped me naked, and you get the jab in the butt cheek. But well, now let's go back and let's dissect that. If that happened in Canada today, first of all, like that whole scenario with the driver, that would not have been possible because drivers are not allowed anywhere near an airport. Like, you have to be a taxi driver or an Uber driver. But even if they did, they'd be violating labor laws. It would be tax evasion. I don't know. Is your car insured? Do you have air safety checks? The house, it would be zoned so you cannot do short-term rental. That one incident with the woman, she'd probably be hauled into a human rights tribunal for racism. And then the doctor would probably be hit with professional misconduct, have his license revoked. So what I'm trying to say is that we don't have freedom, at least not the way I remember it. I guess in summary, what do we got here? We got the destruction of the family unit. So, the downplaying of the mother, control of the money supply, the debit cards, degradation of the culture. So, financialization of the economy. I put that under there, and control of the food supply. I didn't really go over it, but this whole concept of, supermarkets where everything is like bar coded, it just doesn't seem natural to me. And since I am a podcaster, I do have to flex my intellectual muscle. So here's what I think is going on. I think at some point in the 1700s, we transitioned from natural law, sort of, you have law, God's law, and then you have law that the governments can control. And we flipped that around and we said, no. It's government first, and whatever government passes, that becomes your rights. So this whole concept of permissions of rights starts there. And then you had the American Civil War, and before that you had the Revolution, 1776. And I think England just lost it. They start going around the world, starting all sorts of wars. This culminated in World War I, where Britain just basically committed suicide. So the financial sector, it shifted from London to New York, but you still had the two prime reserve currencies of the pound and the dollar. 1945, I think, with the prime reserve currency becoming the US dollar, they got the ability to print infinite money. This money went into the CIA and it started propagandizing people. It happened first with the boomers, and then it happened with Gen X, which is the people that are running the system right now. Then you have my generation, the millennials. We have one foot in socialism. Welfare is kind of good. Healthcare is kind of good. Pensions are kind of good. But then we have one foot in libertarianism. We're like, this isn't working. Endless wars, the great financial crash, COVID. And then you have the youth. I think what's going to happen now is the youth are going to say, wait a minute, you, the baby boomers and the Gen X, you want us to fund your great healthcare system and we have no future? So what we need to do, in my opinion, in this order, dismantle the 1945 socialist system, return to the pre-World War II decentralized form of government, family unit, dismantle the central banks, and then dismantle the British imperial system. So it's no small task. But
the order in which we were going to pull that off. But just from your kind of, let's say, boots on the ground experience here, it's more focused around Canada as it exists in its, let's say, attempts to set new debt records kind of monthly or whatever kind of the current threat would be, I guess, from your perspective, just obviously from the ground, as also in the political realm where we can't, maybe that's a platform. I don't know how we can pull that off, but what would be your, just say, ordering in that human action realm of what you would see as plausible as far as the desire of that next generation not to get saddled with problems?
I was talking to a gentleman last night at the bar, and he said he ran for mayor and he tried his darndest to limit and roll back the size of the bureaucracy, and he goes, it's just not possible. The system is designed in such a way to grow, and it's going to keep growing until it goes bankrupt. So my advice to people right now is lower your consumption, start saving money, stop spending money, because the moment you spend money, you're getting taxed on that, and you're fueling the growth. That's the easiest thing you can do in the short term. The other things like reconstituting the family unit, building up nationalism, getting rid of the central banks, that's going to take generations. Well, you can. I mean, I had a joke. I said in the last election, I almost voted BC NDP to push the country off a cliff. You could try that, but it's going to require like a revolution, and hopefully you'll make it alive on the other side.
Great. Peyman, thank you very much.